Hello, welcome to the Patriot Training YouTube channel. My name is Clay Howell. I am the owner and head firearms instructor for Patriot Training. The topic of this video is medical practitioners and their views on the use of tourniquets. Tourniquet use is something that has become more and more popular in our modern culture. And that's a good thing. And to start out, I am not medically licensed. I'm not a doctor, I'm not a nurse, I'm not a paramedic, I'm not an EMT, nothing like that. I have taken more emergency trauma medical classes than the average bear, that's for darn sure. And I've assisted teaching Stop the Bleed and Essential Medical well over 15 or 20 times. So the exposure is there, but I'm not going to pretend that I'm any kind of a licensed professional in the medical field. That's certainly not true. So that said, you do need to take a medical class from Patriot Training, be it Stop the Bleed, Essential Medical. And the reason why is because my good friend Terry Couch, who is a critical care paramedic, he put these together. Obviously, Stop the Bleed is a national program. He put Essential Medical together as well to kind of pick up where Stop the Bleed leaves off. And these classes are very informational, they're very fun, and they could help you save a life on the worst day of your life. So definitely do that. And somebody who has taken Stop the Bleed with Patriot Training, they reached out to me and they said, Clay, look, man, I really enjoyed Terry's Stop the Bleed class, and we talked about tourniquet usage, and we talked about direct pressure, we talked about wound packing. And he said, but I was talking to a friend who was a nurse, and she was like, whoa, only use a tourniquet as a last resort. And he said, help me understand this. Are they telling me two different things? And I've got to tell you, no, they aren't. And that's the purpose of this video. I'm going to describe this for you with just enough detail to make it make sense, but also in such a way that you can understand in your own head why it sounded different, but why these two people were saying the same thing. Okay. So in order to state this correctly, we must first go back in time. As of the filming of this video, I'm 47 years old, and when I was 12 and in the Boy Scouts, they taught tourniquets. And you'd wrap cloth around a limb, and then you'd put a stick in it, you'd tie the stick, and then you'd twist it. And they taught that you would put this about 3 to 5 inches above the wound, and that you would loosen the stick every 15 minutes or so to get some blood flowing. And the reason you wanted to loosen the tourniquet and get the blood flowing was due to concerns, and those concerns are for hemoconcentration, tissue damage, neurovascular damage, hypoxia to the limb, acidosis, as well as others. All of these bad things can happen, and you'll see that I have put these words up on the screen so you can go Google them if you'd like. And for better or for worse, the last 20 plus years, the global war on terror has provided us as people with a more advanced knowledge of hemorrhage control. Current suggestions when you take a Stop the Bleed or similar class is to apply the tourniquet high and tight. You leave the tourniquet on. You do not take the tourniquet off. In fact, my understanding is the only people authorized to take a tourniquet off are an attending paramedic or an ER doctor. They're the only two people certified to take off a tourniquet or order the removal of one. And that you are to look to apply a tourniquet immediately in the event of life-threatening bleeding, and that bleeding is defined as bright red bleeding, massive amounts of blood loss, or spurting bleeding, which would indicate an arterial bleed. And the Stop the Bleed materials, to which I have access, very plainly state that loss of blood, depending on the severity, the massive loss of blood, the spurting bright red bleeding, can cause death between 2 and 5 minutes, if not shorter, depending on the circumstances. And I don't know how to be any more clear, my friends. If you are bleeding so profusely that you can die in 2 minutes, I think that's what you call a last resort. So you got to understand that paramedics and EMTs, when they arrive on a scene and they're doing their triage and they realize somebody's got some massive bleeding going on, that's a very preventable cause of death right there. They need to treat that right now because that person may not have any more time. And you as a first responder, because civilians are always on the scene before emergency medical professionals are on the scene. If you are trained in tourniquet application, you need to do that. Apply the tourniquet if that's what's indicated. Because that massive bleeding, that bright red bleeding, that spurting bleeding, that arterial blood, that is going to cause that person to die. This, my friends, is a last resort. You don't do that, this person's going to die. That's a last resort. The nurses and the doctors, the clinicians who tell you, oh, you need to watch out, you need to only use that as a last resort, they are 100% correct, my friends. And thankfully, nurses and doctors, they don't always see people with limbs lost and massive bleeding on the spot. That's not a big issue for them. They don't see it as often as they see other maladies. Paramedics, EMTs, depending on what department, depending on the time of day, depending on the cycle of the moon, they might see multiple times in a single shift. So they're going to see that a lot more frequently than your typical nurse or doctor will. So yes, both sides of the coin are telling you the truth. They are not arguing. They are 100% in unison. If you witness, either in yourself or another, that massive bleeding, that bright red bleeding, that spurting bleeding on an extremity, you need to apply a tourniquet, apply it high and tight, use a TOCCC approved tourniquet. I recommend the SAM-XT or the CAT Generation 7. I recommend those because my buddy Terry, who's the paramedic, that's what he uses every day and every week. I am willing to risk the nerve damage. I am willing to risk the tissue damage. I am willing to risk the hemoconcentration. I am willing to risk the hypoxia, the acidosis. I'm willing to risk those. If I'm bleeding so profusely I might die in 2 or 3 minutes, you better believe I will risk those possible long-term things. If it causes me to lose the limb, so be it. I want to stay alive. I've got some more people to train for Patriot Training. I got to make sure my kids are still raised to adulthood. And, I've got some things to live for, so I definitely want to see those things. If I've got to do that without an arm or without a leg, so be it. I'm willing to bear that risk. I'd rather stay alive. And, so that's my thoughts on that. So these medical professionals, they are not butting heads. It's not a difference of opinion. They're saying the same thing 2 different ways, my friends. So that said, you need to get into a medical class right away, especially if you have not had one. If you've had one, you know the pertinence of it, you know the importance, and you need to take one again as soon as possible to refresh those memories. And I would like to advise you that you do not have to be a patriot to train, but you do have to train to be a real patriot. Take care.